Why do you think it is that we see so few female bike mechanics?
Well, it's just always been a male-dominated industry in general, the bike industry. For me personally, I never thought of myself as like a mechanically inclined person, and I never really had interest in working on bikes. There's a shop for that, so I just
Mhm.
just kind of assumed that it was nothing that I needed to personally get into. And I think perhaps other women have, like they ride, but if mechanics isn't their thing, like why get into it?
Right.
Let that be handled by the people that like doing bike mechanic stuff. So, and just like lack of representation. If you don't see a woman in that position, you don't envision yourself in that position. And that was me personally. It was kind of like I really wanted people to look up to and people to learn from that were women, and that was really hard to find when I was
Yeah.
first starting getting into bike mechanic work. So luckily I did have some women, but I also had a lot of very strong men role models too when I was learning. But I was hoping, kind of in my narrative of becoming a bike mechanic, to be that woman for the women that want to learn from other women.
Yes. So how did you get started?
So I got started through my local nonprofit bike kitchen. It was called Key City Bike, and it was a 100% volunteer run organization where people in the community would donate bikes and that were going to go to the landfill or they needed to get out of the garage. And then we would fix them up or we would break them down to recycle the parts. And I started volunteering there because my partner at the time was the executive director and they really needed help. And he was keen on getting some women in the shop because he thought if I was there, then I could bring in other women. And so I started working on bikes there. I felt very inadequate. You get to start with just breaking bikes down, which is a great way to learn. So you're
Yeah.
removing the grips and you're taking tires off the wheels. And um, ultimately, I really started to learn from the other bike mechanics there. And it was very empowering. It was really cool to know that like I am totally capable of doing this and it's something that not a lot of people know. And so it gave me that power and
Mhm.
that empowerment. And I wanted to learn more. So then I started looking into bike school, like how do you learn like the bike mechanic stuff? I started reading, I started watching the Park Tool videos. Um, and ultimately, QBP had a women's bike mechanic scholarship, and I applied for that and got that scholarship.
Mm.
So that was like my first like real training, and that was in 2018. And that was 5 years after I started working at Key City Bike.
And what were you doing before all this?
So before I fell into the bike industry, I was doing real estate. I was a real estate broker. I was an appraiser with the county. Um, and then I was doing that full time, but I had fallen so in love with the bike scene. I was also then doing bike stuff full time. So I was doing my day job of 40 hours a week. I would leave my day job and I'd go straight to the Key City Bike. I started as the executive director there in 2016. So I was putting in about 40 hours a week as the director on top of my 40-hour full-time job. And then I started volunteering as a coach for the high school mountain bike team. And then I wanted to be on the Mankato Bike Advocates Board. And then so it like snowballed
Yeah.
into this like community, getting people on bike passion while I was still kind of working. But then what actually got me out of my day job was Live Cycling had posted on Facebook, and they were hiring somebody, a woman that could work on bikes, that liked to coach biking, that liked to teach clinics, and it was basically describing everything I was doing on a volunteer basis in my community. But it was offering a wage, and I was like, "Oh my God, I didn't even know that existed in this
Yeah.
world." And it was a dream come true landing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And usually when we think of a bike mechanic, we think of somebody in a bike shop, but you've taken this very different career path, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
Does it ever get old? So you do a lot of traveling. Does that
Yes.
traveling piece ever get old?
No, I love
Oh,
traveling. I actually feel like I'm more at home on the road than I do when I'm at home. So luckily for me, that fit in very well with my lifestyle, the travel.
Yeah. There are a lot of different opinions, I think, on women's specific bikes. And in my opinion, like Liv has done so many great things. What's your take on women's specific bikes?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I really do stand behind the live ethos and you know that first of all bodies are different, right? And it's not going to fit just women, of course. But the design behind or the belief behind their design is that they take feedback from professional female athletes where most bikes have been designed around the feedback of professional male athletes or men in general. They also take into consideration the global database of women's geometry. Um, and just from personal experience myself, I can ride one bike and then get on the live and actually feel the difference immediately. It's just a better fit. It gives me an advantage based on my geometry and the way that I ride the bike. Um, but that being said, I think all bikes are awesome. Like I am
Yeah.
not, you have to ride a live.
I think I was Sabre Davidson that I had on the podcast, and she also mentioned something I hadn't thought about buying women's specific bikes is that you're putting your dollars towards people who are using their marketing dollars to sponsor women's clinics and other events. So even if like the bike itself doesn't make that much of a difference for you, just maybe considering where you're spending your money is important too.
Absolutely. And Liv's entire team is made up of women. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for Liv and the support that they've given me. So, yeah, standing behind the brand is number one for me for sure.
So for women who maybe aren't interested in becoming a bike mechanic, although I do want to ask you about that later
Yeah.
also, but for the average woman listening who just wants to learn a little bit more about how to work on her bike so she feels comfortable going out and riding by herself, or um, what resources would you recommend? You already recommend the Park Tools videos, which I also love, but what other resources are there out there?
So that is the person that I want to connect with more than anything because I really feel like everybody can do the basic maintenance on their bikes. I still really believe, yes, you should bring your bike into the shop for annual maintenance, for your, brake bleeds and for your suspension uh, refresh. But really, for if you just want to learn the basics of the bikes, definitely the Park Tool videos. Their United Bicycle Institute is a great place to go. They have a intro to bike maintenance, which is when you bring your personal bike, you're gonna tear it all the way down. You're gonna learn how to use the tools, which tools you need just to do your basic bike maintenance. There's also that Appalachian Bike School, which is another opportunity for basically that same thing. You're going to learn about your bike. I recently partnered with Girls Gone Gravel, and we created a bike mechanic camp slash gravel camp where it's the same thing. You get to ride gravel and you get to learn about your bike for the 3 days that you're there. Um, so if you're looking to do it on your own, definitely park tool videos, not necessarily YouTube videos. There's
Okay.
just so much information out there, so easy to get the wrong information. I'd go through vetted sources, um, or an actual bike school for sure.
Very
Also,
good.
community clinics, like your
Yep.
bike shop might be hosting a community clinic. That's an awesome way as well.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about those Girls Gone Gravel camps?
Yeah, so a couple years ago, I was on a podcast with Girls Gone Gravel, and they were kind of dreaming up this idea where they had a gravel camp, but also where you could learn about your bike. And I was like, yes, this is like my passion. I want women to know how to maintain their bike. What would that look like? And so, Christy Moan, who has a connection with the Gravel House in Patagonia, Arizona, said, well, why don't we host it there in Patagonia? Um, it will have that whole area. We can actually have the women come in and learn their bike maintenance, and then they can also ride the really rad roads of Patagonia. Um, and so it's a 3 full days of actual mechanic work. The first day we have a build party where you're building your bike because you fly your bike in with yourself. And then we do complete teardown of the wheels, so or of the tires, so we can see if you are set up tubeless. And then if you aren't set up tubeless, we get you set up tubeless. So you're going to actually be doing all the work yourself on your bike. You learn about drivetrain maintenance, chain repairs. We learn bar taping. So like all the very things that you're totally capable of doing on your bike, recognizing when there's a shifting issue and how to correct that. We cover electronic shifting, we cover cable shifting, disc brakes, and rim brakes. And so just pretty much all the basics. While also teaching people how to properly use tools as well, bike specific tools. So they're getting the tools one thing, but then learning the correct way to use the tool is another thing. That was really eye-opening for me when I was first learning bike maintenance.
What if somebody was just going to start, like, this all feels very overwhelming. There's so many different things to learn. If they're
Yeah.
just going to start out learning, I don't know, three things, what would those three things be?
My number one thing I would recommend is learning how to clean and lubricate your chain on your bike and how to measure chain wear
Mm,
on the chain.
mhm.
Um, Learning the different torque specs of the bolts that you need to tighten regularly. So that would be anything in your cockpit area. So like the shifters, just the angle of the shifters, your headset, and your seat post. And then just tire pressure and checking your sealant in tires if you run tubeless tires.
For tire pressure, do we need to be using a tire pressure gauge, or are you just, can we just squeeze the sidewalls? What do you?
No, you should use a gauge.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people can get a decent feel, but it's always best to throw a gauge on there if especially if you're specific with your riding. So if you're a rider that does races, then you should know exactly what your tire pressure is and what you like to ride it at.
And how do you know what your tire pressure should be?
Yeah, so that is very relevant to a lot of different things. So the type of surface that you're riding, your rider weight, the type of riding you're doing, the type of tire you're using. So it's really all over, but just a couple of things to mention. So for mountain bikes, you're going to ride a lower tire pressure, which is usually around that 20 to 18 to 25, 30, depending on your rider weight. So for me personally, I'm 180 pounds. I'm going to ride probably like a 18, 19 in the front and a 20, 21 in the rear is typically for the riding that I do up here. And, if you are a lighter rider, you might have a little higher pressure. The lower pressure you have, the more traction you're going to have. And the more traction you have, the faster you can go. So that's actually kind of confusing for a lot of people who are like, the higher pressure I have, the faster I can go. And that might be so with tires and rims from 5 years ago, but the technology in tires and rims over the last few years has changed so much. Um, that now you're hearing the lower pressure riding, even on the road, is going to be faster because of the traction that you're gaining. So, yeah, I will say, just talking on that whole subject, is that one thing that kind of has been eye-opening for me recently is that the more you learn about bikes and just all the different maintenance and the different maintenance per component, the more humbled I feel as a
Mm.
bike mechanic. Like I would never say like I can fix anything. Like it's complicated. It really is. So like that's one thing when you're learning about your bike is learning the component specific on your bike.
Yeah.
Just because it's so different. Everything is so different and there is so much to learn with everything.
Um, I hear so many women's just who are afraid of even getting started working on their bike, and they often say, "I'm just not mechanically inclined." Do you think that that's an actual thing that like some people are more mechanically inclined than others, or is that just a story we tell ourselves?
No, that's 100% true. I would say that based on experience because
Okay.
I'm personally not mechanically inclined.
Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning, I like would never, yeah, it's I would give the bike to the shop. They can deal with it. I'm not gonna figure out how to do this. Um, it wasn't until I started to see the need of understanding that where I'm still not mechanically inclined, but I feel like because I came from a background of not being mechanically inclined, I learned how to learn mechanics systems in a different
Mhm.
way. And then I can teach that. So I do feel like, yes, if you're not mechanically inclined, it is going to be intimidating. For me, it's still intimidating when I'm learning. Um, but it's just the repetitive building confidence, learning in ways that help you understand, is the way that you can tackle that. And like I said, bikes are complicated, but they're also, it's a mechanical system is just that. It is a system. It's made to work in a certain way. So there's a way to break it down and figure it out.
So for ladies who are listening who do enjoy working on bikes and I think that this would be a really cool career, what advice do you have for them? How do you get started?
Yeah, so definitely one of the bike schools. That's where you're gonna learn just how how to do everything to the book, which I think is really important. There's a lot of mechanics out there that have learned just kind of on their own. And yes, they can get through things, but learning by the book and by um, manufacturer specifications, I feel is really important, especially if you're not someone that's 100% confident in
Mhm.
figuring things out yourself. So number one, professional training. I really feel like that's really important. And even like if you're working under a mechanic, I would want to know that they were professionally trained as well. Um, Finding a mentor, even if it is not a woman
Mhm.
mechanic, but a mentor you trust. I wouldn't be where I was if I didn't have the incredible mentors that I've got to work with. Um, and yeah, I guess I've never worked in like a retail bike shop. I
Mhm.
think that might be a good experience. I've only worked, as a demo technician, as a race technician, um, and as a brand tech. So I haven't had like that actual
Yeah.
in-store experience, but if it's something that you're passionate about, I would definitely get into a shop, and that is actually something I would really like to do just to have that experience, not to do it like forever, but just to have that experience of actually seeing the different bikes come in and the different issues that everyday riders run into.
Do you have any friends that are female bike mechanics in a retail bike shop?
Yeah.
Um, and like, is it a positive experience for them? I think that that's probably something a lot of women wonder, like in this very male-dominated industry, does that make sense? Would it be a comfortable place for me to be?
I think it has changed a lot over the last few years. I think it's definitely retailers are starting to recognize the importance of having women in the shop, not just on the sales floor. There's still always going to be, that stigma of somebody walking in and seeing a lady on the wrench instead of a guy on the wrench, and might ask, where's your mechanic at, or do you have someone
Right,
I can talk
right.
to? That's an experience, I've heard a lot. Um, but I think really, it's hard. Like personally, I definitely recently it was pointed out to me that I kind of have a chip on my shoulder.
Hmm.
Like like I walk into shops and almost expect that now because I've personally experienced it so much. So it's like I already have this like, what's it going to be this time? Or like, what am I going to have to prove to
Right.
let them know that I know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I think I'm personally trying to get that chip off my shoulder. And yes, of course, it's important to be aware when you're being talked down to in a shop, but trying to just look at it, I'm trying to frame my mind around not having that like expectation when I come into the shop. I'm really rooting for a positive experience when I come into the shop, which I
Well,
have. It has been getting better over the last years.
yes, I would agree with that. And it's also, I think, if like one shop, they're not treating you kindly, take your money elsewhere and go to a shop where they do treat you kindly and speak to you kindly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, for women who are afraid of going, taking their bike into the shop to talk to a mechanic, do you have any advice on how I explain what's going on with my bike, what my problems are?
Yes. One, try to familiarize yourself just with the bike components. So knowing, this is my bottom bracket, this is my drivetrain. So just knowing how to speak just the basic parts of the bike is just a good way to start. Um, yeah, and then just having examples of when it happens. Like, do you have this issue when you're pedaling or when you're pushing the bike? Or, like when is this issue occurring? Every time you shift into an easier gear or shift into a harder gear. Um, so basically just knowing components, the names of components, and then really good description of what's happening.
How much should we be investing in creating like a home toolkit?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I'll tell you, like when I was first getting into bike maintenance, I just used my local community bike kitchen. So they have work stands that you can go in and use the tools. That was awesome. But then when I wanted to start doing my own stuff at home, I started with just a multi-tool and a floor pump for air.
Yeah.
Um, and a tire lever. So basically a fix-a-flat kit that you would carry with you on your bike. That is what got me through for a long time. During the pandemic, I got laid off from Live doing
Yeah.
events, and I invested in the Abbey Tool home mechanic kit, I think it was. And at the time, it was $1,300, which I thought was really expensive. I think it's now like $1,600. But it had like everything you would need as a bike mechanic for building out a really awesome toolkit. So I invested in that just because it was my career, so I
Right.
wanted to invest in that. But if you're just getting started, you're not ready to invest $1,000 in tools, I would start with just a fix a flat kit. You're going to have a lot of stuff that you need right there for the basic bike maintenance. I would definitely invest in a chain wear indicator or a chain checker. Um, and yeah, just that's pretty much the main things. A hex key set. I've actually had this like idea of like highlighting everything, all the tools in my personal tool roll, the roll that I carry with me
Hmm.
everywhere I go. Um, and yeah, I really do want to share that with people. I
Yeah.
just haven't figured out how to do it in an interesting way. I've started it and then I'm like, oh, this is really boring. Like, so I'm trying to figure out, I'm not a content creator, so I'm trying to figure out how to be more of a content creator to share this stuff with people because it is helpful to know like what tools do I need and if I have that tool, what do I even do with it and how do I use
Right.
it properly? So it's on my list of hopefully I can get figured out soon.
Yes, please do. I have I shared everything that I carry like in my on the bike toolkit.
Yeah.
And to me that was so basic, but so many people were like don't even know what you put in a little on the bike toolkit. So I think
Yeah.
something like that would be super helpful, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And like even yeah, what do you do? Like, yeah, so I have this actuator with me and the CO2 cartridge, but then like do I put it on the bike first? Do I put the CO2 cartridge?
Yeah.
Like
It's
just the
basics, right?
it's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Especially when you're first starting off. So yeah,
Yes.
it's on my to-do list. I'm gonna try.
Please do. Um, what have I not asked you that you would like folks to know?
Well, I was thinking it's spring. It's spring in most of the world right now. We're coming into riding season. What are you doing right now to get your bikes ready to ride? Like I just did it just snowed up here, so it's not like I get to go riding, but like 2 days ago before it snowed, we were starting to see gravel and I was like, we should go for a quick gravel ride. And then I look up at my bike, it's been hanging, in the shop for 3 months untouched. What do
Right.
I need to do to have it ready to ride after it hasn't been sitting for a while? So I thought it'd be cool just to share what I do to get my bike road ready after it's been sitting, if your
Yes,
bike's
please.
in the garage. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to charge the batteries. I've got this RAM access on my bike, so make sure all my batteries are charged, including my spare batteries. I'm gonna change out the shifter batteries that are in the shifters. So that's a coin cell battery, just to have fresh batteries in
Yeah.
there. I am going to check the sealant in both my tires, and I might even take the tires off and check the tape, just because I haven't done that for a few months. And then make sure the air is set. I'm going to lube my chain um, and just run through the gears, make sure that everything's shifting good and check that my shifters are not moving, all the bolts are good, and that's it. So
For
just, yeah,
tubeless
go ahead.
tires, so I generally in the spring, like I just actually did this before we went to Arizona. I just went ahead and undid the valve and poured in more sealant, and I never checked sealant levels. Is that something that I should have done?
Well, no, so yeah, you totally could check the sealant, or you can just add to the sealant. Obviously, if you're adding sealant year after year without checking the sealant, that's gonna get messy.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm running, especially if I'm going on a trip and I don't have time to like check everything, I might just throw some sealant in. The way that I check if I need sealant, which is not a scientific or not even like a manufacturer specific way, is I take the wheel off of the bike,
Hmm.
then I shake it by my ear
Okay.
and I listen for sloshing around of the liquid. If I can't hear liquid sloshing, then I either it's dry or I don't have enough in there is my thought. So I'll usually squirt some in there. Um, yeah, and that's where like the tubeless maintenance is really good to do at least once a year, where you're taking your tire off, you're cleaning out that dried off sealant, and you're getting fresh sealant in there, inspecting your rim tape, those steps. And we
Are we adding a lot of weight if it just keeps drying out and keep putting in new sealant?
No, not
Okay.
necessarily. It's definitely drying out and kind of elasticizing. So it's not adding a ton of weight. I don't think anything that's really noticeable.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got three final questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is what bike or bikes do you ride?
Okay, so my gravel bike is the Live Devote Advanced Pro. Um, I'm actually going to that bike specifically does not have the UDH frame, which is the Universal Derailleur Hanger
Mhm.
frame, which is um a new spec that's coming out on a lot of bikes these days. But the reason it doesn't have that is because it has a flip chip in the dropout. So it can't. So I'm actually going to flip the chip for the first time. I haven't flipped a chip on this bike before, just to ride it in that longer geometry. I'm pretty curious about how that's going to feel. Another cool thing about the flip chip is it elongates the geometry, but it also allows for a wider tire. So I'll also be trying a wider tire this year. And then I also have my Intrigue X Pro, Advanced Pro. That's a mountain bike and a full suspension mountain bike. And then I also have my Intrigue X e-bike, which sadly did not get ridden much last year. I really only ride that bike when I'm helping my partner train
Uh,
because he rides hard and
right.
fast. So I
Yep.
try to stay up with him with that e-bike when he's training. Other than that, usually don't ride it. And then lastly, I have my 2016 Salsa Muckluck fat bike that I am still riding because it is snowy out. So that's my beautiful fleet of bikes that I absolutely love and in love with.
Second question is where's your favorite place you've ever ridden your bike?
So, oh, okay. There's a couple. One, Number one always will be Sedona, Arizona. It's my very favorite place to ride. Even I'm not like a person that likes crowds or touristy areas, but I just feel so connected on the land there. It's insane. I love Sedona. Um, but also there, I'm trying to think what it's called. Ape Canyon. Ape
Oh,
Canyon in it's like Northern Oregon, Southern Washington border area. It's an IMBA Epic Trail. It is just mind-blowing. It's like you're on a different planet. It is really cool. I would check it out. It's Ape Canyon, I think it's called.
thank you for sharing that. I've never ridden there. It's not that far from me, so
Yeah, you should check it out. It's a cool ride. Yeah, and then Italy. Italy's a great place to ride gravel. I've been learning through Hammerhead. That is a cycling computer company that I work for full time. And they have sent me out to this really cool gravel camp. It's no gods, no masters, United We Are tour, and it's a women's gravel tour that is in Italy. I've got to go 3 years in a row now. It's been really incredible.
really cool. Final question for you is what is your favorite thing about riding your bike?
So my favorite thing is just being in nature. I am a slow rider. I call it my nature viewing pace. I have no shame with how slow I am. Um, I ride to be outside and to be in nature. And yeah, it's the most freeing and it just feels good. I tell people like I feel the most beautiful when I am riding my bike. I don't care how I actually look, that's how I feel when I'm on
Yeah.
my